Get comfortable and allow your body to rest. Let your breathing slow. Tonight, you're invited to follow an ancient Celtic journey, a journey beyond the final breath. This is not a story about endings, it is a story about what comes after. Together, we'll explore what Irish mythology says happens to the soul after death, the hidden realms, the old gods, and the quiet cycle of rebirth. There's nothing you need to do, simply listen, and let the story carry you. If these journeys help you rest, you're always welcome to stay with this channel. And now, we begin. In ancient Celtic belief, the soul, Eid Num, was seen not as a singular static entity, but as a dynamic force, an essence that was intricately connected to the world around it. It was said that the Eid Num could never truly be destroyed. Instead, death was viewed as a transition, a crossing over from one state of being to another, rather than an end. The Celts understood that life and death existed not as opposites, but as two parts of the same eternal cycle, forever intertwined. When a person passed from the physical realm, it was not because their soul had ended. No, the Celts believed the soul was simply moving, shifting to a place beyond the reach of the living. Death was not a finality. It was a journey, one that began when the breath left the body, but it did not cease there. It was the first step on a path that led to realms unknown to the living, to a new world that held mysteries beyond comprehension. This understanding of death was deeply ingrained in the spiritual practices of the Celts, particularly through the guidance of the Druids, the sacred keepers of knowledge. The Druids taught that the world was filled with thin play-size, locations where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin, where the veil was lifted just enough to allow the living to glimpse the realm of the gods and the spirits of the dead. It was said that those who knew the paths through these thin play-size could cross into the Otherworld, that elusive land where the souls of the departed journeyed. The Celts believed that after death, the soul would find its way to Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth, or perhaps to Mag Mell, the plain of delights, both wondrous places that stood in stark contrast to the cold, shadowy world of the dead. These were not places of punishment, but of rest and renewal, where the soul could find solace, peace, and the eternal youth that many of the Celtic gods themselves possessed. The idea that one could live in such places forever was not foreign to the Celts. After all, their gods were believed to walk freely between worlds, never bound by the limitations of time or decay. But while these places were considered havens for the soul, they were not always easily reached. The journey after death, while one of transition, was also one of challenge. The path was not straight nor always clear, as the spirit had to travel through realms where shadows moved and the unknown stretched infinitely. Manannán mac Lia, the great god of the sea and ruler of the Otherworld, was often depicted as the guide who would help souls on their journey. His domain was the mist-covered sea, and his boat carried those who had passed into the realms beyond, crossing the divide between the worlds of the living and the dead. And yet, the journey was not always straightforward, for in the Celtic belief system, the gods themselves were always at play, shaping the destinies of both the living and the dead. Dagda, the all-father of the Celtic gods, was said to possess great power over life and death. His magic, a force of creation and destruction, could bring renewal to the soul, as well as prepare it for the challenges that lay ahead. His divine presence could guide the soul through the waters of death, much like a father guiding a child into the unknown. For those who passed, there was the belief that Win, the ancient Celtic festival, marking the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year, was a time when the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead grew thinner still. It was during Win that the spirits of the dead would return to visit the living, and it was said that the souls of those who had recently passed could be seen walking among the living, their journeys not yet complete. As we embark on this journey together, following the path laid out in the old Irish legends, know this: You are stepping into a world where death is not feared, but understood as an inevitable and transformative process. The soul's passage is seen as a necessary journey, filled with teachings, wisdom, and discovery. The ancient storytellers and druids spoke of death not as a tragedy, but as a passage that opens the door to the realms of gods and ancestors, to places of mystery and wonder, where the soul finds its true home. The spiritual framework laid out by the druids guides us as we walk in the footsteps of those who have gone before, embracing the truth that the journey of the soul is not just a journey into death but into rebirth. From the very first breath to the last, the soul is on a path that leads through the mists and fogs of the Otherworld, through realms of gods, and ultimately into the embrace of eternity. The Celts knew that death was not the end, but a new beginning, a continuation of the eternal dance between life and the beyond. When life leaves the body, the Celts believed that it was not an instantaneous severing of soul from body, but rather a gradual parting, a process where the soul separated from its earthly vessel and began its journey to the otherworld. In the ancient traditions, this moment was not one of shock or abruptness, but one of transition. The H-Nam, the soul, would rise gently from the body, unburdened by the physical form it had inhabited throughout its life. It would leave behind the world of flesh, but it was not alone. Awareness lingered, tethered to the body for just a time, even as it began its voyage. The ancient Celts understood the moment of death as one where the soul did not disappear entirely, but rather found itself in a state of heightened awareness. The physical form might lie still, its breath stilled, its heartbeat silenced. But the essence of the person, the H-Nam, was very much alive. In this space, the soul could still observe the body it had once inhabited, and it was believed that the soul remained acutely aware of the passing of time and the reactions of those around it. Though it had left its earthly shell, it could still sense the world of the living, for the boundary between life and death was never fully defined. This awareness, this lingering connection, was seen as a natural part of the transition, a necessary moment before the soul was fully released into the unknown. It was said that some souls would linger for a time, caught between the physical and spiritual realms, watching, listening, and perhaps reflecting on their earthly journey. In Celtic thought, this period of separation was not one of sorrow or fear, but one of deep clarity, as the soul could now see its life from a perspective freed from the confines of the body. It could look upon the world it had known, as well as the people it had loved, with a new understanding, a vision that was untethered by human limitations. In these moments, the soul was said to be held in a sort of suspended state, where the very act of dying was like walking through a doorway, but not yet stepping fully into the next room. The body might begin to cool, but the soul remained conscious, connected to the form it had once claimed as its own. This awareness was not detached or indifferent. It was keenly aware of its new state, able to feel, perhaps, the energy of the departing breath, the final sounds of the body's last exhalation. The moment of death was sacred, and the ancient Celts believed that as the soul began its journey, the otherworldly guides were already waiting, not to hasten or rush the soul, but to guide it in its own time, with patience and care. Morrígan, goddess of fate and prophecy, often depicted as a shapeshifter, was known to call forth the souls of the fallen, guiding them to the next phase of their journey. Her presence was not one of destruction, but of transformation, helping the soul to understand the nature of death and the lessons it carried. In the lore of the Celts, Morrígan would often appear to the dying as a crow or a raven, standing as a silent witness to the transition from life to death. It was said that her wings would unfurl in the twilight, offering the soul a moment of reflection before it began its path into the otherworld. Then her role was not one of grief, but of understanding. The soul's departure was part of the natural order, not a mistake or a tragedy. As the soul detached itself from the body, it was believed to pass through thin places, those locations where the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms was thin. Here, the soul would begin its transition into the otherworld, passing through the veil, where the separation between this world and the next was not so clearly marked. These thin places could be found in the hills, by standing stones, and by quiet rivers. The places where the gods and the spirits of the dead were said to walk. Once the soul began to move through these thin places, it was believed to enter into a state of deep connection with the divine, with the gods, and with the ancestors. It would travel toward the great Eikmineblach, the island of the blessed, a land said to be hidden beyond the mists. This was a sacred place, reserved for the souls of the noble and the brave, those who had lived their lives with honour and courage. It was said to be a land of abundance and peace, untouched by the hardships of the earthly realm. Here the soul would find rest and comfort, bathed in the light of eternal youth. But before the soul reached the final destination of Tir na Nochi, the land of eternal youth, it would first be judged by the gods. Dagda, with his great wisdom and knowledge, would weigh the deeds of the soul, assessing the life it had lived. This judgment was not harsh, but rather a reflection of the life lived, a moment of clarity for the soul to see the consequences of its actions. It was a time of reflection, where the soul could understand both its strengths and its flaws, its triumphs and its regrets. The soul, now freed from the constraints of the body, was at peace, its awareness intact, no longer bound by the limitations of time and space. It could understand, perhaps, the delicate balance of life and death, the way the two forces intertwined to form a single, eternal cycle. The Celts understood that life and death were not enemies, but partners in the great dance of existence. The soul, in its journey, would continue to cycle, ever moving toward new beginnings, new lessons, and ultimately new rebirths. And as the soul moved further from the world of the living, it began to feel a deep sense of release, as though it was finally stepping into its true form. It would no longer be shackled by the mortal world, but instead would be free to roam the vast landscapes of the otherworld, where time held no dominion. It was in this space that the soul could begin its preparation for rebirth, for the Celts believed that the journey after death was not just one of rest, but one of renewal, a chance to start again in a new form, in a new life. In the moments after death, while the soul is aware and beginning its journey toward the otherworld, there was a belief held by the Celts that the H-Nam did not immediately leave its earthly ties. Instead, it lingered for a time among the living, remaining near the family and the places it had known in life. This lingering period was seen as a time of transition, where the soul, though detached from the body, would still be bound to the physical world by the threads of memory, affection, and attachment. This belief was rooted in the idea that the soul's journey was not one of immediate detachment from the living, but rather a gradual separation, a process that allowed the soul to come to terms with its new existence. In many Celtic stories and traditions, the spirits of the recently departed were believed to return to familiar places, whether that be the family home, a favourite meadow, or the sacred groves where they had once walked in life. The H-Nam would hover gently over these places, watching as the world continued without them, and listening to the voices of those they had left behind. During this time, the soul was not an entity of unrest. It was said that the spirit of the dead might communicate with those still living in subtle ways, through dreams, whispers, or sudden flashes of memory. The Celts believed that the dead could offer guidance or reassurance to the living in the form of a gentle breeze, the scent of a familiar flower, or a flicker of light in the dark. These signs were seen not as unsettling or frightening, but as confirmations that the spirit had not yet fully departed, that it was still tethered to the earthly realm by the bonds of love and loyalty. The living, especially the family, were expected to honour these connections. Rituals and offerings were often performed to help guide the soul through its journey, to ease its path and ensure that it would reach its destination without confusion or delay. Win, the most sacred time of the year, was a time when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest, and it was believed that the souls of the departed would return to visit their families during this time. Families would set places at the table for their lost loved ones, leave offerings of food and drink, and light candles to guide the spirits on their way. It was a time for reflection and remembrance, as the living acknowledged the souls that had once been a part of their lives in the family circle. The act of honouring the dead was an important part of maintaining harmony between the two worlds, the living and the dead. The Celts believed that by offering this respect, they could keep the bond between the two realms strong, ensuring that the soul could complete its journey. However, if the soul was not properly honoured, it was believed that it could become trapped, unable to move on to the final resting place of the Otherworld. This could cause discomfort both for the soul and for the living. The soul, unable to fully depart, might become restless, wandering the earth in a state of confusion or distress. The lingering soul might appear to those it loved most, sometimes bringing comfort, but other times causing unease. The ancient Celts believed that the souls of the dead, while they lingered among the living, were often seen near the familiar, the comforting places of the past. It was said that they would return to watch over their homes, their loved ones, especially in times of great need. This was not a punishment or a sign of unrest, but an act of love, as the soul would often return to offer support in moments of crisis, helping guide or protect the living from danger or harm. For example, in some stories, the soul of a departed mother might return to her children, watching over them as they slept, her presence a source of comfort and security. She might appear as a shadow at the window, a familiar figure who reassured her children that they were not alone, that she was still there in spirit. These visits were often fleeting, as the soul's time in the earthly realm was limited. Once the soul had made its peace with the living, it would gradually begin to move on, slipping through the thin veil that separated the worlds and passing into the other world. The belief that the soul could linger also extended to the places that were of deep significance in life. A soul might return to the places it had loved the most, whether that was a favourite tree in the forest, a river bank where it spent time in reflection, or even the hearth of the family home. These sacred places were imbued with memory and meaning, and it was said that the souls of the dead would revisit them in their own time, not in a spirit of haunting, but as a way of paying one final visit before the journey continued. In some cases, the soul might be seen as a guide for others, helping to point the way for the newly deceased, particularly those who had left the world suddenly or without preparation. The Celts believed that those who had walked the path of death before could become guides for others, especially the souls of loved ones who'd been recently departed. These guiding souls would appear in dreams or in visions, offering wisdom or comfort to those still living, ensuring that the newly departed soul did not lose its way. In the Celtic Otherworld, which was a realm of rebirth and rest, the journey of the soul was always watched over by the gods, who cared for the dead as much as they cared for the living. Manannán, the sea god, was often depicted as the one who would shepherd souls to the other side, ensuring their safe passage from the world of the living into the land of the gods. But before the soul could reach this destination, it was believed to linger for a while among the living, visiting those it had known and making its final farewells. Ultimately, the lingering soul in Celtic tradition was not something to fear. Instead, it was seen as a natural part of the soul's journey, a sign of the deep bonds that connected the living and the dead. This connection was not broken by death, but continued to thrive as the departed soul watched over its family and friends, ensuring that its memory remained alive in their hearts. And as time passed, the soul would eventually depart, slipping gently into the embrace of the Otherworld, where it would rest until the time for rebirth arrived. In the ancient wisdom of the Celts, there existed a mystical concept known as thin places, sites where the veil between the living and the dead, between this world and the other world, became paper thin, so fragile that one could almost reach through and touch the other side. These were sacred spaces, marked by the presence of the gods and the spirits, where the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms was not fixed, but fluid, allowing for easy passage between the worlds. These places were revered for their power, believed to hold great significance in the journey of the soul, especially at the time of death. Thin places could be found scattered across the Irish landscape, on mist-covered hills, near standing stones in ancient groves of trees, or beside quiet rivers. These places were often unassuming, humble in appearance, or yet they were seen as portals to the divine, where the realms of mortals and gods intermingled. It was believed that at these thin places one could feel the presence of those who had passed into the otherworld, and the whispers of the spirits could be heard in the wind, guiding the soul on its journey. The Celts understood the world as being composed of many layers, with the physical realm that we occupy being only one layer of a much larger, more complex existence. The otherworld was not distant or unreachable, but woven into the fabric of the living world just beyond our sight and our touch. At thin places, these layers would converge, allowing for direct interaction with the unseen realm. It was in these places that the barriers between life and death, between the gods and mortals, were the most fragile, and it was said that the souls of the departed could move freely between the two worlds. But it was not just the spirits of the dead who passed through these thin places. The gods themselves were said to walk these paths, sometimes visible to the living, sometimes not. Morrígan, with her shape-shifting power, might be glimpsed as a raven flying through the mist, her presence a reminder that the gods too walked the earth and interacted with the souls of the departed. Manannán the great sea god, was said to have used the thin places to cross between the mortal realm and his realm in the otherworld, guiding the souls of the dead on their journey to eternal rest. Among the most significant times when the thin places became most active, when the boundaries between worlds were most easily crossed, was Samhain, the ancient Celtic festival that marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of the dark half of the year. Samhain, celebrated on the night of October 31st, was believed to be a time when the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, allowing for a fluid crossing between the two worlds. The Celts recognised Samhain as a time when the spirits of the dead would return to visit the living, when ancestors could be honoured, and when the souls of the departed might walk among the living. It was believed that during Samhain, the gods and spirits could communicate more freely with humans, and that the thin places were especially powerful during this time. The spirits of the dead were not seen as distant or unreachable. Instead, they were thought to be present, their memories alive in the minds of the living, their presence felt in the air. It was at this time that the ancestral spirits were most closely linked to the living, as families would leave offerings of food, drink and light to honour their dead and guide them on their journey. Bonfires would be lit to illuminate the night, both to celebrate the end of the harvest and to ward off any lingering spirits that might be lost or restless. These fires also served as a beacon, a guide to the souls of the dead, lighting their path through the darkness of the year's end and helping them find their way to the otherworld. But Samhain was not only about honouring the dead, it was also a time of reflection and renewal. It was a time when the old year died and the new year was born. The Celts believed that during Samhain the forces of life and death were in balance, and the cycle of the seasons mirrored the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It was a time to remember that the soul's journey did not end with death, but continued, ever moving toward renewal and transformation. The thin places, especially during Samhain, became a realm where the living and the dead could interact, and the veil between the worlds was lifted. It was said that those who had recently passed might return to visit their loved ones during Samhain, appearing in dreams or as fleeting visions, reminding them that the soul never truly leaves, but continues its journey in a realm just beyond the physical. The gods, too, were believed to walk the earth during this time. Dagda, the All-Father of the Celtic pantheon, was said to bring blessings of abundance and harvest, and Brigid, the goddess of fire, poetry, Issa and healing was honoured with offerings of candles and hearthfires to bring warmth to the cold nights of winter. These deities, who were believed to move between worlds, showed their presence by appearing to mortals in various forms, whether as a warm glow on a cold night, a sudden gust of wind, or a flickering of light among the trees. It was during SAH Win that many of the gods' powers were most felt, as the living were reminded of the deep connections between the realms of the dead and the living. SAH Win marked a time when the Otherworld was not just a place for the departed, but a place where the gods, ancestors, and the spirits of the dead moved freely, reminding the living that they too would one day cross over into the great unknown, joining the spirits who walk through the thin places. For the Celts, Mandas, SA Win was not only a celebration of the harvest and the changing of the seasons, but also a time of spiritual reflection. It was a moment to honour those who had gone before, and to remember that death was not the end of the journey, but merely a part of the eternal cycle of rebirth. The thin places during SA Win offered a reminder that the separation between life and death was an illusion, a boundary that, though it appeared solid, was merely a fleeting moment in the vast eternal dance of the soul. As the firelight flickered and the night grew cold, the Celts would gather together, feeling the presence of their ancestors, sensing the thinness of the veil, and understanding for a brief moment that the journey of the soul was not bound by the limits of time or space. It was a journey that continued, always moving, always evolving, always walking through the thin places between the worlds. In the ancient Celtic worldview, the journey to the Otherworld was not simply a quiet passage made by the soul on its own accord. It was a summons, a call that came from the very heart of the mystical realms that lay just beyond the veil of the physical world. The souls of the departed were drawn toward the Otherworld by a force both alluring and inevitable, as if the gods themselves were calling them home. In Celtic stories, the Otherworld was not a distant, abstract place, but a realm alive with energy, vibrant with the presence of the gods and spirits. It was a land where time and space worked differently, where youth and vitality existed in a perpetual state, where the soul could find peace and renewal. But while the Otherworld was a place of beauty and rest, it was also a place of transformation, a destination that no soul could avoid once its time had come. The call to the Otherworld as described in Celtic myth was not loud or abrupt. It was gentle, subtle, like the tug of the tide pulling the soul from the shore, beckoning it toward the distant horizon. The gods themselves, often the most powerful figures in these myths, were said to be the ones who issued this call, guiding the souls toward their new existence. Manannán mac Lia, the great sea god and master of the mists, was said to be one of the primary guides who called the souls of the dead to the Otherworld. His domain stretched over the sea, that vast and unknowable expanse, where the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual was thin and ever-changing. Marhach Nunann's call was not a loud command, but a beckoning whisper carried on the winds, a presence that could be felt in the rustling of leaves or the gentle crashing of waves against the shore. It was said that when the time came for a soul to journey to the Otherworld, Manannán mac Lia would stand on the shores of his misty realm, his boat awaiting the soul's arrival. He would guide the departed soul across the endless sea of fog, beyond the horizon of the mortal world, into the ethereal realms where time did not flow in linear fashion. His presence was reassuring, calming, an eternal guide who led the soul into its place of rest. Yet, it was not always the gods who issued the call. In some myths, the call to the Otherworld was personified by a divine figure whose sole purpose was to bring souls into the realm of the gods. Morrígan, the dark goddess of fate, death and prophecy, was one such figure. While she was often associated with the battlefields and the fate of warriors, she also held dominion over the souls of the departed. It was said that she could take on the form of a crow circling above the fallen in battle, but she was equally a guide for those whose time had come. Her cry, a harsh caw, was believed to be the voice that summoned souls to their rest. calling them away from the world of the living and into the embrace of the otherworld. Morrigan's call, unlike Manannán's gentle beckoning, was often associated with the more tumultuous aspects of death. It was a call to transformation, to change, to a soul's rebirth. And Morrigan's presence was said to be a reminder that the journey to the otherworld was not always peaceful or without struggle. The soul, in its departure, was understood to undergo a kind of trial, a test before entering the realms beyond. This was not a trial of punishment, but a purification, a moment when the soul was cleansed of its earthly ties and prepared for the next phase of its existence. For those who had not died in battle or had not received Morrígan's call, the journey to the otherworld might be initiated by more subtle means. In some stories, the soul would hear a voice, soft and familiar, calling it from the familiar world into the unknown. It might be the voice of a loved one, an ancestor, a figure from the past, someone the departed soul had once known in life. This voice would often come in dreams, or in moments of stillness, and the soul, recognizing the call, would feel a deep pull toward the source of the sound. In the Celtic belief system, the soul's journey was not just a personal affair. It was deeply connected to the community, to the family, and to the wider fabric of the world. The call to the otherworld was often described as a shared experience between the living and the dead. It was said that the ancestors, those who had walked before, would also help to guide the departed soul, especially if it was one who had left too soon or had not yet fully understood its purpose. These ancestral spirits, who had already made the journey, would reach out across the veil, offering comfort, wisdom, and companionship to the newly departed soul. Sometimes the call to the otherworld was expressed through nature itself. The Celts believed that the world around them was full of signs, symbols, and messages from the gods. A dying soul might hear the call in the rustling of trees, the murmur of rivers, or the crash of thunder in the sky. These natural sounds were thought to be expressions of the gods, signalling the soul's departure. For example, the cry of a bird, a raven, an owl, or a crow might be seen as a sign of the soul's journey. These birds, known to the Celts as messengers of the gods, were believed to carry the souls of the departed into the otherworld, their calls echoing through the air as a signal that the soul was about to cross over. When the call to the otherworld was heard, the soul would respond not with fear, but with an understanding that the time had come. The journey, while unknown and perhaps daunting, was a natural and necessary part of existence. The Celts believed that death was not the end but the beginning of a new chapter, one that would bring renewal, peace, and rest. The call to the otherworld was a summons to embrace this next phase with open arms, for it was through death that the soul would find its true home. Thus, the soul's journey to the otherworld was not a solitary one. It was a process guided by the gods, by ancestors, and by the natural world itself. The call, whether through the winds, the voices of loved ones, or the cry of the birds, was a constant reminder that death was but a doorway, and the otherworld was the destination where the soul would finally rest, at peace and in the embrace of eternity. In the vast and mystical realms of the Celtic otherworld, Manannán mac Lia, the great sea god, stood as one of the most revered and powerful figures, a figure whose role was central in the transition of souls from the world of the living to the eternal peace of the otherworld. His presence was felt in the very elements that separated life from death, particularly the sea, which in Celtic myth was both a barrier and passage. To cross the waters of the sea was to enter another realm, and Manannán was the divine guide, the one who stood between the realms, ensuring that the souls of the departed reached their final resting place. Manannán mac Lia was not only the god of the sea, but also the master of the mist, the fog, and the waves that separated this world from the next. It was said that he ruled over the waters that lay beyond the horizon, where no mortal could venture. His domain was a place where the boundary between the physical and spiritual realms was ever-changing, where the waters of the sea could shift to reveal a path to the otherworld. As the one who controlled the tides and the fog, he had the power to conceal the mysteries of the journey, but also to reveal them when the time was right. To the Celts, the sea was both a source of life and a place of death. It was a vast, unknowable force that could both nourish and destroy, a reminder of the constant cycle of life and death that defined existence. The sea was the great divider between the known world and the unknown, a threshold that, once crossed, would lead to a realm where time didn't pass as it did in the mortal world. It was into this world that Manannán guided the souls of the departed. When a soul left its physical form behind, it was believed to journey through the mist and fog that veiled the world of the living. Manannán, in his great wisdom, would stand at the threshold, awaiting the soul's arrival. His role was to guide the departed safely across the sea, to steer them toward the shore of the Otherworld, where they would find peace and rest. The sea god's boat, often depicted as an ethereal vessel made of shimmering light, would be ready to carry the soul from the shores of the mortal realm to the hidden lands beyond. The crossing itself was not one of fear, but of calm and reassurance. It was said that Manannán's voice would call out to the soul, his words gentle and welcoming, offering comfort as the soul began its journey. His presence was a reminder that the journey to the Otherworld was not one of abandonment, but of connection. He was the guide who ensured that the soul would be safely ferried across the boundary, away from the physical world and into the peace of eternity. The crossing was also symbolic of the journey from life to death itself. The soul, like a traveller on the sea, had to leave behind all that was known and familiar. But with Manannán's guidance, the soul would never be alone. He was both protector and guide, ensuring that the soul would not lose its way in the shifting waters. The fog that surrounded the crossing was not an obstacle, but a sign of the divine protection that Manannán provided. The mist was a veil that shielded the soul from the unknown, a protective shroud that kept the journey safe from harm. In Celtic stories, it was said that only those who had the blessing of the gods would be able to cross the sea to the Otherworld. The journey was not for all souls, but for those who were destined for peace and rest, for those who had lived their lives with honour, or for those who had been chosen by the gods themselves. Manannán's role was not just to ferry the soul across the water, but to ensure that the soul was worthy of entering the Otherworld. One of the most powerful aspects of Manannán's role as guide was his ability to communicate with the souls he guided. It was said that he could speak directly to the spirit, offering words of wisdom and reassurance as the soul sailed toward its new home. Manannán was a god of great knowledge, and he understood the journey of the soul better than any other. His words were not only a comfort, but also a reminder that death was not an end, but a continuation of the soul's eternal journey. It was also said that Manannán could take on many forms. While he was often depicted as a mighty sea god, he could also appear as a traveller, a figure whose very presence commanded respect. In some stories he would take on the form of a cloaked figure, standing by the shores of the sea, ready to offer his guidance to any soul who arrived at the boundary. His ability to shapeshift was a reminder that the Otherworld was not a fixed place, but a realm that could be entered in many ways, depending on the soul's need and the guidance it required. But Manannán's role was not only to guide the dead. He also held dominion over the living, and his powers extended beyond the boundaries of death. His voice could be heard in the winds and the waves, and he was said to have the ability to protect the living from the spirits of the dead who might wander the mortal realm. In this way, he ensured the balance between the living and the dead, keeping the peace between the realms and maintaining the natural order. In some myths, Tir na Nohg, the land of eternal youth, was where Manannán's influence was most strongly felt. This magical land, where the souls of the dead could find rest and eternal youth, was ruled by him. It was said that the soul, once crossing into the Otherworld under his guidance, would find itself in this place of endless beauty and serenity, where time ceased to exist and no decay could touch the body. Here, the soul would be free from the burdens of the mortal world, living in a state of eternal youth, untainted by the passage of time. As the soul's journey continued, it would find its place in the vast landscape of the Otherworld, but Manannán's presence would never be far. His role as protector and guide did not end once the soul had crossed the sea. His influence was felt in the land itself, in the mist that covered the shores of the Otherworld, and in the eternal peace that reigned there. Thus, Manannán mac Lir stood as the divine guide of the dead, a figure whose presence was both a comfort and a reminder of the great journey that awaited all souls. He was not just a god of the sea, but a god of transitions, of passages, and of eternal rest. His boat would carry the soul across the boundary between life and death, ensuring that the journey would be safe, peaceful, and ultimately fulfilling. Beyond the fog and the mist, beyond the shifting boundaries of the living world, lies the land where the soul of the departed finds its ultimate peace and renewal. Tir Nu Nog, the land of eternal youth. This sacred realm, so central to Celtic mythology, is where the souls who have completed their earthly journey are reborn into a state of eternal youth, untouched by time, decay, or sorrow. It is a realm of beauty, of serenity, and of endless possibility, where the soul finds its true home, forever free from the burdens of the mortal world. In mythic accounts, Tir Nu Nog is often depicted as a place of great beauty, a land untouched by age or disease. It is a realm of rolling hills, vibrant forests, and crystal-clear waters, an idealized version of paradise where time does not exist as it does in the mortal world. The very air is said to be thick with the scent of flowers in eternal bloom, the sunlight always warm and golden, and the sounds of bird song and laughter filling the air. Here there is no hunger, no thirst, no fatigue, only eternal fulfillment and peace. In Celtic stories, Tir Nu Nog is not just a place of rest. It is a place of renewal and transformation. It is the final destination for souls who have been guided by Manannán mac Lir, the great sea god, across the mist-covered waters of the Otherworld. Once a soul has made the journey and crossed into Tir Nu Nog, it is free from the trials and suffering of the physical world. In this land, the soul is granted eternal youth, no longer bound by the ravages of time. The soul is reborn in its purest form, ageless, vibrant, and full of potential. The experience of entering Tir Nu Nog is one of profound peace and wonder. For the soul, it is as if the weight of life's struggles, illness, hardship, sorrow, has been lifted completely. There is no pain, no fear, no loss. The soul is free to wander the endless fields, to bathe in the rivers that flow like liquid silver, and to rest beneath the evergreens that offer shade in a land that knows no seasons. It is a place where the spirit can rejoice in its freedom, where the soul is not merely at rest but at ease, eternally content and at home. In Celtic mythology, Tir Nu Nog is closely linked with the gods, particularly the Tuatha Dé Danann, the divine race of gods and goddesses who are said to reside there. The gods of Tir Nu Nog are eternal, powerful and beautiful, and their presence permeates the land. They are the keepers of this realm, ensuring that its peace remains unbroken and its beauty undisturbed. Dagda, the All-Father of the Celtic pantheon, is one such god who is often associated with Tir Nu Nog. His presence is a reminder that this land is one of abundance and harmony, where every need is met and every soul finds its true purpose. One of the most famous accounts of Tir Nu Nog in Celtic myth involves the hero A.W. Sheen, a member of Effion Mac Cú Will's warrior band, the Effiona. A.W. Sheen, in his youth, was invited to Tir Nu Nog by the beautiful Niamh of the golden hair, a goddess who lived in this magical realm. She took A.W. Sheen across the sea on a shimmering horse, carrying him to the land where time did not pass as it did in the mortal world. A.W. Sheen, upon entering Teer Nu Nog, has experienced the fullness of life, youth, beauty, and strength, without the limitations of age. He lived there for what seemed like a few years, full of joy and adventure, before he returned to the mortal realm, only to discover that centuries had passed. The story of A.W. Sheen's journey into Tir Nanog reflects a central theme in Celtic belief: the fluidity of time in the Otherworld. In Tir Nanog, the soul experiences time not as a linear progression, but as a fluid, ever-changing moment that can be experienced in an eternal present. The gods and spirits who dwell there are not bound by the same constraints as mortals. They are timeless beings, and in their realm, time itself is suspended, offering the soul a chance to live without the fear of growing old or fading away. This state of eternal youth is not merely a physical condition, but a state of being, a realm where the soul can exist in its purest, most vibrant form, forever free from the pain and limitations of earthly existence. Souls in Tir Nanog experience not only the beauty and peace of their surroundings, but also the opportunity for eternal growth and renewal. While the soul is free from physical aging, it is not stagnant. It is believed that in Tir Nanog, souls continue to evolve, learning and growing in wisdom and understanding. In some myths, the souls of the departed are said to engage in great feasts, where they are nourished not only by food and drink, but by the wisdom of the gods. These gatherings are places of deep reflection and joy, where the souls can commune with one another and with the gods, reflecting on the lives they led and the journey they took to reach their eternal home. There is also the belief that in Tir Nanog the soul can find its purpose fulfilled. It is a land where every being exists in harmony with the universe, and the soul, freed from the worries and burdens of mortal existence, can finally embrace its true calling. This calling is often understood in the context of the soul's relationship with the gods. The gods of Tir Nanog do not simply welcome the soul into their realm. They offer the soul the opportunity to work in tandem with the divine, to participate in the ongoing dance of creation and transformation that defines the Otherworld. The soul, in its newfound state of eternal youth, experiences not only peace, but also the ability to explore and learn. Whether by communing with the gods, participating in the eternal cycle of life, or simply existing in the land's beauty, the soul continues to evolve in Tir Nanog, embracing the endless possibilities of its existence. However, the experience of Tir Nanog is not solely about the soul's contentment. The land itself is imbued with a deeper spiritual significance, a symbol of the divine harmony that exists between the mortal and immortal realms. While time flows differently in Tir Nanog, it remains ever present, a reminder that the soul's journey is one of both transformation and rest, never truly complete, always evolving into something greater. In Tir Nanog, the soul finds its true home, a place where it can exist forever in youth, beauty, peace, and purpose. It is a realm where the soul is reborn not just in body but in spirit, constantly evolving, constantly growing, and ever connected to the divine. In the realm of Celtic myth, the Otherworld is not a single place, but a vast, complex network of divine realms, each with its own purpose and significance. Among these, Mahgmel and Vinab Lac stand out as two of the most notable destinations for the souls of the departed. Each of these lands offers its own form of solace and renewal, yet they embody different aspects of the journey to the afterlife. Together, they represent the duality of existence in the Otherworld, a place both of rest and rejuvenation, and one of eternal bliss, untouched by the struggles of the mortal realm. Mahgmel, the Plain of Delights, is a land of beauty, abundance, and eternal peace. It is often depicted as a paradise, a lush and verdant landscape where joy and contentment are eternal. In Celtic stories, Mahgmel is a place where the soul can experience true rest after its long journey through life. It is a realm where there is no sorrow, no pain, and no suffering, only the unending enjoyment of the pleasures of existence. The plains are fertile and filled with flowers that never wilt, rivers that flow with clear waters, and meadows where the grass remains forever green. In many ways, Mahgmel is the ultimate reward for the virtuous and the pure of heart. Souls who are welcomed into this realm are granted eternal happiness and fulfillment, free from the burdens of mortality. It is said that the souls here are bathed in the light of eternal youth, remaining untouched by the ravages of time. In this land, the soul is free to live in peace, surrounded by beauty and harmony. There is no aging, no decay, only the enduring joy of existence. Mythology is often associated with the Tuatha Dé Danann, the race of gods and goddesses who are said to reside in this land. These deities, powerful and eternal, are the guardians of the souls who come to Mythology. They ensure that the soul is granted all the comforts it needs, helping it to transition from the trials of the mortal world to a place of divine rest. The gods of Mythology are seen as nurturing and protective, offering their hospitality to those who have passed on, ensuring that they are safe and at ease in their new home. For the soul, entering Mahgmel is akin to stepping into a state of perfect harmony, a place where time has no meaning and all desires are fulfilled. It is a place of unending beauty, where the soul is free to experience the fullness of existence without fear of death or decay. There is no separation here, no isolation. The soul is united with the land, with the gods, and with all who have passed before. In Mythology, the soul finds its rest, its reward, and its place in the great cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Yet while Mythology represents the idealized paradise of the afterlife, Finality, another legendary realm of the Otherworld, offers a different form of solace. Finality is often described as a mystical island shrouded in mists and located beyond the seas. It is said to be the realm of the gods, the home of those who have transcended mortal life and become one with the divine. This land, though still a place of peace and abundance, holds a more sacred and mysterious quality than Mythology, and it is frequently associated with the highest and most exalted beings in Celtic mythology. In many accounts, Finality is depicted as a place where the greatest heroes and deities dwell, a land of eternal youth where they can live in peace and harmony, free from the limitations of time. The gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann, as well as legendary heroes, are said to reside here, enjoying their immortal existence. Finality is a place of glory, a land where honour and virtue are rewarded, and where the soul finds its place among the divine. It is in this realm that those souls who were brave in life, who fought for the good of others, and who proved themselves worthy of divine favour, are said to be welcomed. The landscape of Finality is often described as awe-inspiring. Magnificent castles and palaces stand tall against a backdrop of mist-covered hills, and the skies above glow with an ethereal light. The very air is thick with the power of the gods, and the souls who enter this land are said to experience not just rest but a kind of exaltation. They are granted a position among the immortals, sharing in the divine beauty and strength of the gods themselves. Here, they continue to live out their eternal lives, participating in the sacred rhythms of the Otherworld and playing a part in the great cosmic order. For the Celts, Finality represented the ultimate reward for those who had lived lives of honour, wisdom, and bravery. It was not a place for the faint of heart or the unworthy, but for those who had truly proven themselves in life. Souls who arrived here were not simply given rest. They were elevated to a higher plane, becoming part of the divine order of the world. In Finality, the soul was no longer simply a passive participant in the afterlife, but an active and powerful force within the cosmic realm, continuing its journey alongside the gods and the eternal heroes. While both Mahgmel and Finality represent paradisiacal realms, they serve different purposes in the afterlife. Mahgmel is the land of eternal bliss, where souls are at rest, free from suffering and sorrow. It is a place of peace, harmony and beauty, where the soul can enjoy the rewards of its earthly journey in an endless, unchanging state of happiness. Vinebí-lach, on the other hand, is the realm of the gods and the greatest heroes, where the soul is elevated, transformed, and given a divine purpose in the eternal dance of creation. It is a place of power and glory, where the soul finds its place among the immortal beings of the Celtic pantheon. Both realms, however, are united in their role in the afterlife. They are places of transition and renewal, where the soul can find its final resting place, whether that be in eternal peace or divine exaltation. Together, Mahg, Mel and Vinebí-lach represent the full range of the soul's potential in the afterlife, from peaceful rest to divine transformation. In Celtic mythology, these realms offer the soul an opportunity to continue its journey, to grow, to evolve, and ultimately to find its true place in the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. At the heart of the Celtic pantheon stands Dagda, one of the most powerful and revered gods, whose dominion over the cycles of life and death reflects the profound balance that the Celts believed governed the universe. Known as the All-Father, Dagda was not merely a god of power and strength, but also one of wisdom and deep understanding. His control over the natural world, its cycles, and the fundamental forces of life and death were central to the Celtic understanding of existence. He personified the eternal dance between creation and destruction, peace and conflict, life and death. Dagda's role in the balance of life and death was not one of arbitrary control, but of guardianship. The Celts believed that the world could only thrive when these forces, life, death, and rebirth, remained in harmony. Dagda, as the god who oversaw these cycles, was charged with maintaining this balance, ensuring that no single force ever became too dominant, for to do so would unravel the fabric of the universe itself. Dagda's Cauldron of Plenty was one of the most iconic symbols of his power. This mystical cauldron, said to have an endless supply of food, is a symbol of creation, of life's continual nourishment and renewal. It was said that anyone who ate from this cauldron would never go hungry, that its magic could replenish those who were weary and bring them the strength to carry on. This cauldron represented Dagda's ability to create life, to feed and sustain the people and the land, ensuring that abundance was always available. However, the cauldron was not merely a symbol of life's fullness. It was also a symbol of death's inescapable presence. It was said that the cauldron could also serve as the vessel for the souls of the dead. Those who passed into the Otherworld, having completed their mortal journey, were believed to be carried into the cauldron to rest. There they would be nourished and purified before being reborn into new forms, continuing their eternal journey. In this way, Dagda's cauldron symbolized both the creation and the destruction of life, the cycle of death, leading to renewal. Dagda's control over the great wheel of time was mirrored by his relationship with the seasonal cycles. In Celtic tradition, time was not linear but cyclical, marked by the changing seasons and the eternal flow of nature. Dagda was intimately connected with the rhythms of the earth. He was seen as the god who brought spring and summer, who gave warmth and harvest, and who also brought autumn and winter, the seasons of decay and rest. It was in this duality that Dagda's influence was most keenly felt. He was the bringer of life and death in equal measure, ensuring that one could not exist without the other. One of the most striking tales of Dagda's control over these cycles is found in the myth of the Battle of Mag Tuarid, where he played a pivotal role in the fate of the Tuatha Dé Danann. The gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann were locked in a great struggle against the Morrígans, a race of monstrous beings who sought to dominate the world. The battle was a clash between two forces, the Morrígans representing chaos and destruction, and the Tuatha Danann standing for order, harmony and creation. In this battle, Dagda fought alongside the Tuatha Danann, wielding his mighty club, which could kill with one blow but also bring life to those it struck. This club, often referred to as the Club of Life and Death, symbolised the god's absolute power over the forces of existence. With a single swing, Dagda could strike down his enemies, ending their lives, yet with the same club, he could bring healing and life to those who had fallen in battle. His ability to wield such a weapon embodied the duality of life and death. Both forces were part of his nature, and he held the power to control their ebb and flow. The Battle of Mag Tuired was not simply a physical conflict, it was a cosmic struggle between creation and destruction, life and death. Dagda's role in this battle was pivotal because he was able to bring balance to the forces at play. In the end, the Tuatha Danann emerged victorious, but only because Dagda had ensured that death was not a force of finality. Instead, it was part of a greater cycle. Death was not an end, but a transition that led to new beginnings. Beyond his role in the battle, Dagda's influence over life and death was also reflected in his leadership of the Tuatha Danann and his relationship with the other gods. Dagda was known for his wisdom and his ability to maintain harmony within his people. His wisdom extended beyond the physical realm. He understood the necessity of both life and death in the cycle of the world. He knew that the land could not remain fertile forever, just as the people could not remain forever young. And death was not something to fear, but something to embrace as part of the natural order. Dagda's influence was also marked by his role as a god of prophecy. In many tales, he was called upon to foresee the future, to see the outcomes of actions that had not yet come to pass. His ability to see beyond the present allowed him to guide the actions of the Tuatha Danann, ensuring that they would follow the path of balance and harmony. He understood that the forces of life and death could not be avoided, they were inevitable. However, by maintaining balance, he was able to guide his people through the cycles of existence, ensuring that their lives would be full and their deaths would be peaceful. Another symbol of Dagda's control over the cycles of life and death was his harp. This magical harp, known as the Manannán, was said to have the power to control the seasons. When played, the harp could summon the spring rains, make the crops grow, or bring the warmth of summer. But it could also summon the cold winds of winter, reminding the people that death, like the harshest season, was a necessary part of the cycle. Dagda's harp was not only a tool of creation, but a reminder of the inescapable passage of time, the ebb and flow of life, and the eventual return of death. In this way, Dagda represented the profound wisdom of the Celts, that life and death were not opposites, but intertwined forces that were essential to the world's balance. His control over these forces ensured that life could flourish, knowing that death would come in its own time, and that death would bring renewal, for the cycle of life would begin anew. Dagda, with his wisdom, power and compassion, stood as the eternal guardian of this cycle. His role a reminder that the journey of existence is ever-changing, but always moving toward the ultimate balance between life and death. At the heart of Celtic myth stands Morrígan, the goddess of fate, prophecy, and sovereignty, whose connection to death and rebirth is both profound and multifaceted. Often depicted as a shapeshifter, Morrígan embodies the ever-changing nature of life, death, and transformation. She's not simply a goddess of destruction and war, as she's commonly thought of, but a divine figure who oversees the cycles of death and renewal, weaving the threads of destiny and ensuring that the natural order remains in balance. Morrigan's role in the Celtic pantheon is intrinsically tied to the idea of transformation, both literal and symbolic. She's a goddess who brings about endings, yes, but those endings are always followed by new beginnings. She represents the cyclical nature of existence, where death is not a finality, but a necessary passage that leads to rebirth. In Morrigan, the Celts saw a powerful embodiment of the duality between life and death, creation and destruction, darkness and light. In her most well-known form, Morrígan appears as a crow or raven, often circling over the battlefields, her presence signalling the end of a life and the beginning of the soul's journey to the Otherworld. As a goddess of war, she was said to decide the fates of warriors, choosing who would live and who would die. Her appearance on the battlefield was a harbinger of death, yet it was also a sign of the renewal that followed in the wake of conflict. In many ways, Morrígan could be seen as the bringer of finality, but also as the one who ensured that death was not the end, but part of the ongoing cycle of existence. Morrigan's connection to death is not one of cruelty or malice, but of transformation. She stands as a figure of both destruction and renewal, for in Celtic thought, the end of something, whether a life, a season, or an era, is only a prelude to what is to come. In her role as the weaver of fate, Morrigan presides over the natural order, ensuring that all things, even death, serve a purpose in the grand design of the universe. Her call to the fallen warriors in battle is not just a signal of their death, but an invitation to cross into the realm of the dead, where they will be transformed and prepared for the next stage of their journey. The battle may end in loss, but the cycle of life continues, with death opening the door to the Otherworld. Morrigan's ability to shapeshift further emphasises her deep connection to transformation. She's often portrayed as changing her form, moving between the physical and spiritual realms, and inhabiting both human and supernatural shapes. This constant flux reflects the ever-changing nature of existence, where nothing is fixed and everything is in a state of constant flux. Whether she appears as a raven, a beautiful woman, or a terrifying dark figure, Morrigan is always in the process of becoming, just as life itself is always evolving and transforming. In the myth of the cattle raid of Cooley, Torn Bo Coolnew, Morrigan plays a pivotal role in the fate of the hero Cuchulainn. She first appears to him in the form of a beautiful woman, offering him her help and counsel. However, when Cuchulainn rejects her, she transforms into a series of different creatures, a crow, a cow, and a wolf, each symbolizing a different aspect of her nature and the forces at play in the world. As a crow, she foreshadows the violence of war and death, but her transformation also suggests the possibility of renewal and change. She's not merely a goddess of death, but of fate and destiny, guiding the events of the world with her ever-shifting nature. Her ability to shapeshift also ties her to the Celtic belief in the power of the land and the cycles of nature. Just as the land itself experiences the seasons, birth, growth, death, and rebirth, so too does Morrigan embody the natural rhythms of life. The changing of the seasons, the ebb and flow of life's energies, mirrors the way in which Morrigan oversees the passage of souls, Nresisen, guiding them through the cycle of life and death, ensuring that each soul is transformed before moving on to its next incarnation. Morrigan's power over rebirth is seen most clearly in her relationship with the Celtic Otherworld, a place of renewal and transformation. Souls that pass from the mortal realm are not simply gone, they are transformed, taken by Morrigan to the lands beyond, where they are purified and prepared for what comes next. This belief in transformation is deeply rooted in the idea of reincarnation, which was central to Celtic thought. It was believed that the soul, upon death, did not simply fade away, but instead moved through different realms, evolving and growing as it passed through different stages of existence. In this process, a Morrigan plays a key role. Her influence ensures that the soul is not only guided to the Otherworld, but also given the chance to evolve and be reborn in a new form. Morrigan's connection to death and rebirth also extends to her role as a goddess of prophecy. She was known for her ability to foresee the future, to see the cycles of time and the fate of the world. In some myths, she would appear to warriors or kings, offering them a glimpse into what was to come, sometimes foretelling their deaths. but also offering them the possibility of rebirth through their actions. Her prophecies were often ambiguous, reflecting the idea that fate was not fixed, but was shaped by choices, actions, and the natural flow of the world. Her role as a prophetess reminded the Celts that death was not a thing to be feared, but a natural part of the ongoing cycle of existence, where death and rebirth are intertwined in a continuous dance. In many ways, Morrígan represents the power of change, the ability to transform and evolve through the forces of life and death. Her shape-shifting, her control over fate, and her connection to the realms of the dead all underscore the Celtic belief that death is not the end, but a transformation that leads to something new. Her presence is a reminder that endings are simply preludes to new beginnings, and that the soul, once it has passed through the realm of death, can be reborn in a new form, ready to face the challenges of the next life. In Morrígan, the Celts saw the embodiment of the natural cycles of existence, the cycle of death and rebirth, of decay and growth, of destruction and creation. And she was not a figure of fear, but one of reverence, as she ensured that the flow of life continued, with each soul finding its place in the great cycle of existence. Morrígan, in all her forms, was a goddess of transformation, reminding the Celts that death was not to be feared, but embraced as a necessary step in the journey of the soul, one that would ultimately lead to renewal and rebirth. In the Celtic belief system, the afterlife was a realm of profound transformation, but it was not a place of judgment or eternal punishment, as it is often conceived in other traditions. The Celts did not view death as a moral reckoning where the soul was eternally damned or rewarded for its actions in life. Instead, the journey of the soul after death was seen as an opportunity for reflection, growth, and ultimately renewal. The Celtic afterlife was not one of finality or retribution, but of healing and the continuation of the soul's journey through different realms, each offering a new opportunity for understanding and evolution. In this worldview, the soul, once it crossed into the Otherworld, did not face a harsh judgment based on its earthly deeds. There were no eternal fires to burn the wicked, nor golden gates to welcome the virtuous. The Celts understood that life itself was a series of lessons, challenges, and experiences, and death was not an end to this process, but a step toward a deeper understanding. The gods, and figures like Manannán, Maclia, and Morrígan, were not arbiters of harsh punishment, but guides who helped souls reflect on their lives, offering them the opportunity to learn from their past experiences and move forward with wisdom. This perspective of death and the afterlife is perhaps best seen through the lens of reincarnation, which was a core belief in Celtic spirituality. The Celts did not believe in a single final death, but in a continuous cycle where the soul would move from life to death, and death to life again. After death, the soul would often enter the peaceful and restorative realms of the Otherworld, such as Tir na Nor or Mag Mel, where it could find rest, healing, and reflection. These realms were not places of punishment, but places where the soul could rest and undergo renewal, preparing for the next phase of its journey, whether in a new life or in further spiritual growth. Instead of facing eternal damnation, the soul's journey in the afterlife was centered on self-reflection and reconciliation. It was believed that after death, the soul would reflect on its life, its choices, actions, and the lessons it had learned. However, this reflection was not done under the harsh light of judgment, but in a manner that allowed the soul to come to terms with its earthly journey. This reflection was seen as a natural process of growth, Dandi, where the soul could understand its purpose, its mistakes, and its triumphs. The goal was not to punish the soul, but to help it evolve and move forward on its eternal journey. The idea that souls were not judged for eternity also tied into the Celtic view of fate and destiny. The Celts believed in the power of fate, but they also believed in the ability of the soul to shape its own path. The gods did not impose rigid destinies upon the souls of the dead, but instead offered guidance and understanding. The soul had the freedom to reflect on its journey, to understand its place in the larger cosmic order and to seek transformation. This process of self-discovery was not punitive. It was an opportunity for growth, healing, and the eventual return to the cycle of life. In the Celtic afterlife, there were no eternal punishments, only the potential for rebirth and renewal. Souls were not condemned for their imperfections or their failures, but instead were given the opportunity to be reborn, to try again, and to continue their journey toward enlightenment. This belief in reincarnation emphasized that life was a continual process of learning and growth. Death was not seen as a final judgment, but as a passage into a new form of existence, one where the soul could continue its path of spiritual evolution. This cycle of death and rebirth was integral to the Celts' understanding of life itself. Manannán, the sea god who guided souls across the boundary between the living and the dead, was often seen as a figure of mercy and guidance. He did not pass judgment on the souls who crossed his realm, but helped them move forward on their journey. The Otherworld was a place of rest and rejuvenation, not a place of retribution. It was where the soul could find solace, peace, and the clarity needed to begin anew. Even Morrígan, who was often seen as a harbinger of death, was not a figure of eternal punishment. Rather, she was a goddess of transformation. Her role in Celtic mythology was not to condemn, but to help guide souls through their journey, whether by showing them the fate of war or by offering the possibility of change. She embodied the duality of life and death, not as opposing forces, but as complementary ones. Through her, the Celts understood that death was not a punishment, but a necessary part of the soul's evolution. The absence of eternal judgment in the Celtic afterlife speaks to a deeper understanding of compassion and growth in the face of life's challenges. The Celts did not view death as the final verdict on one's existence, but as a moment of reflection and renewal. Souls did not face the prospect of eternal punishment, but the opportunity to reflect on their lives, to learn from their experiences, and to transform. The gods, rather than condemning, helped guide the soul to its next step, whether it was in the Otherworld, in reincarnation, or in eternal peace. In the Celtic afterlife, the soul's journey was one of compassionate reflection and eternal growth. The idea of harsh judgment was foreign to the Celtic understanding of death. Instead, the soul was allowed to come to terms with its life, to understand its path, and to move forward with greater wisdom and clarity. This process of self-reflection, transformation, and rebirth was seen as a natural part of existence, a cycle that continued forever, with no final judgment but an endless opportunity for learning, growth, and renewal. Thus, in Celtic thought, death was not feared as a judgmental end, but embraced as a part of the greater cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The soul, free from the constraints of eternal punishment, could continue to evolve, its journey never ending, always moving toward greater wisdom, peace, and spiritual understanding. In Irish mythology, the relationship between the living and their ancestors is one of profound importance. The ancestors are not seen as distant figures who merely existed in the past, but as active, guiding forces whose spirits continue to influence the living world. These Celts believed that the dead did not simply vanish upon death, but instead lingered, maintaining a connection with their descendants and offering wisdom, guidance, and protection. The meeting of ancestors in the afterlife was seen as a sacred encounter, one that allowed the living to tap into the deep well of knowledge and experience that their forebears had accumulated over generations. Ancestral encounters in Irish mythology were not limited to a distant, abstract concept of the dead. Instead, thus the spirits of the ancestors were often depicted as walking among the living, appearing in moments of great need or profound significance. These meetings were not frightening or ominous, but rather were seen as opportunities for the living to receive guidance, warnings, and wisdom from those who'd gone before. The Celts believed that the ancestors, through their actions in life, had gained a deep understanding of the world and its mysteries. Their spirits, therefore, carried this knowledge, which could be shared with their descendants, offering them the wisdom they needed to navigate the challenges of their own lives. In many myths, the ancestors were seen as spiritual protectors, watching over their descendants, ensuring that their bloodline remained strong and their paths remained true. It was believed that the spirits of the dead could offer their guidance in times of crisis or conflict, helping the living to make decisions that aligned with their true purpose. These encounters were often seen as acts of great importance, moments when the veil between the living and the dead became thin enough for the wisdom of the past to be passed down to the present. One of the most famous examples of ancestral encounters in Irish mythology is the story of Oisin, the hero and poet of the Fia Nu. Oisin, who journeyed to the Otherworld with Niamh of the golden hair, is later brought back to the mortal world, only to find that centuries have passed. Upon his return, Oisin encounters the spirits of his ancestors, who offer him wisdom and guidance about the changes that have occurred in the world during his absence. This encounter serves as a reminder that the souls of the ancestors remain connected to the living, providing them with the knowledge they need to understand their place in the world and their connection to the past. Similarly, in the Torn Bo Cúailnniu, cattle raid of Cooley, the great hero Cú Chulainn receives wisdom from his ancestors during moments of intense battle. It is said that Cú Chulainn could communicate with the spirits of his forefathers, who appeared to him in dreams or visions, offering him advice and insight into his role as a protector of his people. These ancestral encounters are not only significant for their mystical and spiritual elements, but also for their practical implications. They help guide the hero through the challenges he faces, providing him with the strength and clarity needed to overcome adversity. The Celts also believed that certain sacred places, often referred to as thin places, were where the spirits of the ancestors could be more easily contacted. These places were seen as bridges between the physical world and the spiritual realm, where the veil between life and death was thin enough for the living to communicate with the dead. Sacred groves, ancient burial mounds, and other natural landmarks were thought to be imbued with the presence of the ancestors. In these places, the living could offer prayers, sacrifices, or simply engage in quiet reflection, hoping to receive guidance from the spirits of their forebears. The act of honouring the ancestors was central to Celtic spiritual practices. Rituals and offerings were made to ensure that the spirits of the dead were appeased and that their wisdom continued to guide the living. The Samhain festival, for example, was a time when the veil between the worlds was believed to be at its thinnest, and the spirits of the ancestors were invited to return to the mortal realm. During this time, families would gather to honour their forebears, offering food, drink and prayers to ensure that their ancestors' spirits would continue to guide them in the year ahead. In these encounters, the ancestors did not act as judges or punishing figures, but as wise guides, offering their insights and teachings to help their descendants live fulfilling, meaningful lives. The wisdom passed down from generation to generation was seen as a living, dynamic force, an ever-present source of guidance that the living could draw upon in times of need. The connection to the ancestors was also closely tied to the idea of ancestral lands. For the Celts, the land was sacred, and the spirits of the ancestors were believed to inhabit the very earth itself. The sacred land was not merely the physical world, but a spiritual place where the memory of the ancestors lived on. It was said that the soul of the land itself carried the wisdom of the forebears, and that those who tended the land in respect and reverence would be blessed with their guidance and protection. Through their encounters with the ancestors, the living were reminded of their place in the great chain of existence. They understood that they were part of a larger cycle, one that connected them not only to the gods and spirits, but to the generations that had come before them. These connections gave meaning to life, reminding the living that they were never truly alone, that the wisdom of their ancestors was always available, waiting to be called upon when needed. In some stories, the ancestors themselves were believed to possess great magical power, which they could impart to their descendants. This was especially true in the case of heroes or warriors who, through their connection to their ancestors, were able to draw upon the strength and knowledge of the past to accomplish extraordinary feats. The ancestral spirits were seen as living forces of great power, capable of influencing the living world and shaping the future. But these encounters were not always about gaining power or insight for personal gain. In Celtic mythology, the relationship with the ancestors was one of honour and respect. The living were expected to acknowledge the wisdom of their forebears and to carry on their legacy, ensuring that the cycles of life, death, and rebirth continued in harmony. The ancestors were seen as an integral part of the world's spiritual fabric, and their guidance was meant to help the living navigate the complexities of existence, while remaining true to the wisdom of the past. Ultimately, the encounters with the ancestors in Irish mythology were not just about receiving guidance or insight, they were about honouring the continuous cycle of life and death, of understanding that every generation contributes to the greater whole. Through these encounters, the Celts understood that their connection to the past was not merely symbolic, but a living, breathing force that shaped their lives, their futures, and the very land they inhabited. The ancestors were always present, always watching over them, and always ready to offer their wisdom to those who sought it. In the rich tapestry of Celtic spirituality, the idea of reincarnation was not a distant or abstract concept, but a deeply ingrained belief that shaped how the Celts understood the journey of the soul. Unlike many traditions where the soul's journey is seen as a singular, linear experience, the Celts viewed life as a continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This cycle, with its constant rhythm, was a process of learning, growth, and evolution. The soul, ever moving and ever changing, would be reborn again and again, each new life offering the opportunity for deeper understanding and spiritual maturation. For the Celts, reincarnation was not about the soul starting from scratch with each new life, but rather about the soul carrying forward the wisdom, experiences, and lessons from past lives. This concept of the soul's journey was rooted in the belief that each life the soul lived added to its knowledge, bringing it closer to wisdom, understanding, and spiritual enlightenment. Life was not seen as an isolated event, but as a series of opportunities for the soul to learn, to grow, and to ultimately return to the divine source. In Celtic mythology, this belief in reincarnation was often linked to the idea of the immortal soul. The soul was not bound by time or the limits of the physical world. It was an eternal essence, capable of living multiple lives, each one a step forward in its eternal journey. The Celts believed that the soul was part of a much larger cosmic order, one in which each individual life, with its triumphs and struggles, played an integral role in the unfolding story of existence. This understanding of reincarnation can be seen in the way the Celts viewed the land of the dead and the realms of the gods. The Otherworld, where the souls of the departed journeyed, was not a final resting place in the way that many other cultures saw the afterlife. Instead, it was a place of rest, rejuvenation, and learning. A transitional space where the soul could reflect on its past lives, rest from its earthly journey, and prepare for the next phase of its existence. In the Otherworld, souls could meet with their ancestors, gain wisdom, and understand the lessons of their past lives, which would guide them in their future incarnations. The concept of reincarnation was also closely linked to the idea of fate. The Celts believed in a divine pattern, woven by the gods, that guided the soul's journey through multiple lives. Manannán the god of the sea and the guide of souls, was often depicted as a figure who helped direct souls through their journeys, ensuring that they followed the proper path of reincarnation. His role as a guide was not simply to ferry souls from one life to the next, but to help them understand the lessons they had learned in previous incarnations. Through this guidance, the soul could continue to evolve, shedding its past limitations and growing closer to its divine purpose. In the Celtic belief in the afterlife, death was not the end of the soul's journey, but merely a pause, a moment of reflection before the soul was reborn. This belief is echoed in the myth of Oisin. After spending what he thought were a few years in the Otherworld, Owarshin returns to the mortal realm only to discover that centuries have passed. This tale illustrates the idea that time, in the Otherworld, is not the same as it is in the mortal world, and that souls, while they rest in the afterlife, are preparing for their next journey, their next life. Another aspect of Celtic reincarnation is the idea that the soul does not simply return in a human form, but can be reborn in many different ways. The soul may return in the body of a human, but it could also take on the form of an animal, a plant, or even a natural force. This fluidity in form reflects the Celtic belief that the soul is not confined to a single identity or body. Each new life is an opportunity for the soul to experience the world from a different perspective, to learn new lessons, and to grow in ways that would not be possible if the soul remained fixed in one form. In this context, transformation is key to the process of reincarnation. The soul, through its many lives, would undergo constant change, shedding old patterns and beliefs, and evolving into something more refined. This transformation was seen as a natural part of the soul's journey, and it was believed that each life carried with it the potential for spiritual enlightenment, for a deeper connection with the divine. The belief in reincarnation also had a profound impact on the Celtic understanding of family and ancestry. The soul's journey was not seen as an isolated event, but as one that was deeply connected to the ancestral line. The Celts believed that the soul of a person could return to their family, not only to live again in the flesh, but to carry on the family's legacy. The soul would return to the same bloodline, is carrying forward the lessons of its past lives, and helping the family to grow and evolve spiritually. In this way, the family was seen as a key vehicle for the soul's evolution, as each generation passed down its wisdom and experiences to the next. The idea of reincarnation also influenced the Celtic approach to death, since the soul was not seen as ending with death, but rather as transitioning into another life. Death was not viewed with the same finality as it might be in other cultures. Death was not feared, but accepted as a natural part of the soul's journey. The Celts believed that death was simply the soul's way of moving on to the next phase of its evolution, and that each life was an opportunity for the soul to gather knowledge, wisdom, and experience to carry with it into its next incarnation. The Celts also believed that prophecies and visions could offer glimpses of past lives. In some stories, figures such as the Druids, who were spiritual leaders and seers, had the ability to access the memories of past lives through visions or trances. These glimpses into past lives were seen as important for understanding one's purpose and path in the present life. The knowledge of past incarnations could help individuals make decisions, understand their strengths and weaknesses, and fulfill their destiny. Ultimately, the Celtic view of reincarnation reflects a deeply spiritual understanding of existence. The soul, ever moving and ever evolving, is not bound by the limitations of time or the physical world. It is a force of transformation, constantly growing, learning, and adapting to the cycles of life and death. The journey of the soul is not one of judgment, but of evolution, a journey that continues through many lives, each offering new opportunities for wisdom, growth, and spiritual enlightenment. The belief in reincarnation served as a reminder to the Celts that life is not a linear, isolated experience, but part of an eternal cycle. Each life the soul lived was not just about the individual, but about the ongoing journey of the spirit through time, through the worlds, and through the vast tapestry of existence. The soul's purpose was not to reach a final destination, but to continue learning, growing, and evolving with each new life, a journey that would never truly end. As the eternal cycle of life and death unfolds, the soul's journey is never truly complete. The Celts believed that death was not the end, but merely one phase in the ongoing cyclical process of existence. After resting and reflecting in the Otherworld, the soul would prepare for its next great adventure, rebirth. This moment, though not immediate, was one of great importance, as the soul, having been rejuvenated by the wisdom of past lives and guided by the gods, was ready to return to the mortal realm, where new lessons awaited. Rebirth in Celtic mythology is not a sudden return, nor is it an arbitrary decision. It is a careful and deliberate process, with the soul being prepared by the gods and the spirits of the Otherworld for its next incarnation. This preparation is deeply connected to the idea of learning and evolution. The soul, having journeyed through death and transformation, carries with it all the wisdom it has gained from its previous lives. Now, before it returns to the mortal realm, it must reflect on the experiences it has gained, ensuring that it enters the next life with a clear understanding of its purpose and goals. The Otherworld itself, a land of rest and rejuvenation, is where the soul finds peace, reflection, and the opportunity to heal from the struggles of its past lives. In this realm, the soul reconnects with the gods, ancestors and spirits, all of whom help guide the soul toward its next phase of existence. Here, the soul comes to understand what it has learned and what it still needs to learn. It is in the Otherworld that the soul reflects upon its past actions, not in judgment, sastes, but in a way that allows for growth and spiritual development. One of the key figures who helps the soul prepare for rebirth is Manannán Moch Lia, the sea god and guide of souls. Manannán, who controls the passage between the physical world and the Otherworld, ensures that the soul is ready for its return to the mortal realm. His role is not only to guide souls across the sea to the Otherworld, but also to help them prepare for the transition back to the world of the living. Manannán's presence is both a comfort and a reminder that the soul's journey is a continuous one, marked by cycles of death, rebirth, and transformation. Under his guidance, the soul learns to embrace the idea of rebirth, that it is not a return to the same life, but the beginning of a new chapter in its eternal journey. Before the soul returns to the mortal world, it must reflect on its lessons. The journey of the soul is not a simple repetition of life, but a continuous process of evolution. Each time the soul is reborn, it does so with a greater understanding of itself, the world, and the divine order. In preparation for this next phase, the soul is given the opportunity to review its past lives, learning from the mistakes, triumphs, and choices it has made. This process of reflection is not one of punishment or judgment, but of clarity and growth. The soul recognizes the lessons it has learned and the ways in which it can improve, embracing the opportunity to continue evolving. The preparation for rebirth is also a time for the soul to reconnect with its ancestral lineage. In Celtic belief, the ancestors are always present, watching over the living and the dead. As the soul prepares to re-enter the mortal world, it draws strength from the wisdom and guidance of its ancestors. The spirits of those who have gone before provide counsel, offering the soul a sense of purpose and direction. The ancestors remind the soul that it is part of a greater family line, a continuing cycle that stretches across generations. The wisdom of the past is woven into the soul's future, helping to guide it through the challenges of its new life. In Celtic mythology, this process of preparation and reflection is not one of isolation. The gods and spirits are always present, offering their support and guidance. Dagda, the All-Father, is often seen as a father figure who watches over the souls, ensuring they are ready for the next phase of their journey. The gods are the stewards of fate, ensuring that the soul's journey is aligned with its true purpose. The gods, who govern the natural world, help the soul prepare for its return by guiding it through the complex process of transformation, from the rest of the Otherworld to the challenges of mortal life. The soul's return to the mortal world is not a random event, but a carefully orchestrated process. In Celtic beliefs, the soul is born into a family and life that will help it fulfill its purpose. The gods ensure that the soul is reborn in the right time, place and circumstances, so that it can continue its journey toward enlightenment. The soul's new life is an opportunity to complete the lessons that it was unable to fully grasp in previous lives. It is reborn with the knowledge of its past experiences, the wisdom of its ancestors, and the guidance of the gods. the soul is ready to embrace the challenges and opportunities that its new life will bring. Once the soul has undergone its reflection and is ready to return, it must cross once again through the veil between the worlds. The transition from the otherworld back to the physical world is a delicate process, for the soul must remember its purpose while shedding the memories of past lives. This allows it to enter the mortal world with a fresh sense of direction, ready to live once more, but with the wisdom of the past carried deep within. The transition is not sudden, but a gradual process, allowing the soul to adjust to the changes it will face in its new life. The moment of rebirth is not a chaotic or dramatic event, but a gentle return. The soul enters the physical world through birth, and though it may forget the specific details of its past lives, it carries with it the essence of what it has learned. The lessons of the past are subtly integrated into the soul's new identity, shaping the choices and experiences that will unfold in this new incarnation. The soul is born once more, ready to embark on a new journey, but always carrying with it the wisdom of its previous lives and the promise of further growth. For the Celts, the soul's return to the mortal world was not a mere cycle of life and death, but a sacred process of evolution. Each life was an opportunity to fulfill the soul's true purpose, and each death was a chance to reflect and prepare for the next chapter. Rebirth was a gift, a chance for the soul to continue its journey toward wisdom, enlightenment, and union with the divine. Death, after all, was not an ending, but merely a doorway leading to a new beginning, a new life, and a new opportunity for transformation. As the eternal dance between life, death, and rebirth unfolds, the moment the soul begins its descent back into physical existence is one of profound significance. After resting, reflecting, and growing in the otherworld, the soul is ready to return to the mortal realm, to take on a new form and continue its journey. This return is not a mere accident of fate, nor is it a chaotic leap into the unknown. Rather, it is a deliberate, purposeful descent, guided by the divine, where the soul prepares to re-enter the world of the living with the lessons of its past lives etched deep within. This descent is not instantaneous. It is a slow and gentle process, a transition that requires the soul to shed the ethereal nature of its being and re-engage with the physical world. The journey back into life is one that requires the soul to pass through the veil that separates the spiritual realm from the physical, much as it did when it first left the mortal world. But this time, it is descending into a new reality, a fresh life, an opportunity for new lessons, and a chance to continue its evolution. The guides of the soul, such as Manannán the god of the sea, or Morrígan, the goddess of transformation, ensure that the soul is ready for this transition. They are the keepers of the thresholds, the figures who watch over the boundary between worlds, ensuring that the soul's journey is not hurried or abrupt. Manannán, for example, would stand at the shore of the otherworld, ready to guide the soul as it leaves the realm of peace and enters the realm of the living once more. His boat, which carried the soul across the sea during the initial crossing into the otherworld, would be ready to ferry the soul back to the land of the living, allowing the soul to pass through the mist that separates the worlds. But the descent back into life is not only a physical journey, it is a spiritual descent, where the soul must reconnect with its physical body in the mortal world. The descent is described as a loosening of the soul from its pure spiritual form, where it begins to re-enter the material plane. As the soul moves closer to physical existence, it begins to take on more defined shapes, reuniting with the elements of the body it will inhabit. It is as though the soul, in its purity, gradually becomes woven into the fabric of the physical world, reconnecting with the forces that govern life on Earth. In Celtic belief, the body is not something to be discarded or rejected. It is a vessel through which the soul can experience life. The physical world is seen as a sacred reflection of the spiritual realm, and the soul's descent back into life is seen as a return to its true purpose, to live and learn once again. The body is not a barrier to the soul, but a medium through which the soul can experience the world anew. As the soul enters this physical existence, it reconnects with the earth and all its elements, its very breath becoming a part of the landscape it inhabits. The moment of birth is the point at which the soul fully descends into life, when the body and spirit become one. As the soul enters the newborn form, it brings with it all the knowledge and experiences of past lives, though much of this is veiled and hidden within the subconscious. The ancestors, the gods, and the spirits who have guided the soul throughout its journey remain present, offering support and wisdom as the soul begins to experience life once more. In Celtic belief, the soul's entrance into life is not a blank slate, but rather a continuation, a fresh start where the soul begins its new life with the wisdom of all it has experienced. However, the soul's descent into physical existence is not without its challenges. While it carries the lessons of the past, it also comes into a world that is subject to the limitations of the material realm: time, decay, and physical suffering. The descent is a journey that involves the soul forgetting much of what it has learned as it becomes immersed in the physical world once again. The soul, in its new body, must relearn and rediscover the wisdom it once possessed. The process of learning and growth begins anew, but this time with the deep wisdom of past lives ready to guide the soul along the way. As the soul enters its new life, it is said to be aware of the purpose it must fulfill, even if this awareness is not always conscious. The journey of reincarnation, the cycle of life and death, is a sacred rhythm, and the soul descends into life with the knowledge that its time in this form is temporary. While it is fully engaged in the experiences of the physical world, the soul remains aware of its true nature, that it is a part of the eternal flow of existence, and that death is not an end, but another step in the ongoing journey. The descent is not merely a return to the physical world, it is also a return to the self. The soul, in re-entering life, seeks to understand itself anew, to find its purpose in the ever-changing world around it. Each new incarnation offers the soul the chance to continue its spiritual evolution, to explore different aspects of existence, and to test the lessons it has learned in past lives. The soul may be reborn into a family, a society, or a culture that will shape its experiences in new ways. Yet despite the challenges and limitations of mortal life, the essence of the soul remains unchanged, carrying with it the wisdom of all it has learned. As the soul begins to interact with its new world, it is guided by the deep and subtle influence of the Otherworld. The lessons it has learned in previous lives, the guidance of its ancestors, and the wisdom imparted by the gods continue to shape the course of its journey. While the soul may not consciously remember the details of its past lives, it carries the imprint of those experiences within, and these memories influence its choices, its relationships, and its destiny. The process of re-entering physical existence is one of rebirth and renewal. The soul, having rested in the otherworld and undergone reflection, returns to life not as a blank slate, but as a being rich with experience, purpose, and the potential for growth. Each new life is a chance for the soul to evolve, to continue its journey of learning, and to fulfill the destiny it has set for itself in the grand tapestry of existence. The descent into physical existence is thus an essential part of the eternal cycle. It is a moment of deep spiritual significance, marking the soul's return to the mortal realm and the continuation of its journey toward wisdom, enlightenment, and divine connection. The soul, yet descending once more into the physical world, is not a being in exile, but one that is fully engaged in the divine dance of creation and transformation, forever part of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. In the rich cyclical worldview of the Celts, spiritual continuity was a fundamental concept, intricately woven into their understanding of life, death, and rebirth. The soul, eternal and ever-changing, carried the memory of past lives, not in the form of exact recollections, but as a deeper spiritual understanding that transcended time and space. This continuity was not merely a remnant of the past, but a dynamic force that shaped the soul's journey, guiding it with wisdom drawn from its experiences across countless incarnations. When a soul prepares to enter the mortal realm once more, the memory of its past lives is not wiped away entirely. Though it may forget many of the specifics, such as names, places, and events, the soul retains a more fundamental spiritual memory. This memory is not intellectual, but an intuitive, energetic connection to the lessons learned, the challenges overcome, and the wisdom gained throughout its many lifetimes. It is a remembrance of essence, a deep, internal knowing that influences the choices the soul makes, the paths it follows, and the relationships it forms in each new life. The idea of spiritual continuity is crucial to the Celtic belief in reincarnation. The Celts did not see each life as a solitary experience, but as part of an eternal journey, a series of interconnected lives that serve to shape and refine the soul's true nature. This continuity is not linear, but rather cyclical, as the soul moves through multiple lifetimes, each one offering new opportunities for growth, learning, and spiritual development. In each new incarnation, the soul may begin again, in a new body, a new family, a new culture. But the spiritual memory of past lives lingers. This is not always a conscious recollection. Indeed, the soul may not remember specific events from its previous lives, but it is present in the choices made, the patterns that emerge, and the wisdom that subtly influences the individual's actions. It is a memory that guides the soul from the shadows, offering intuitive nudges towards certain experiences, relationships, or challenges, ensuring that the soul continues to evolve along its path. This spiritual continuity is deeply connected to the ancestral lineage. The soul is not separate from its ancestors, but is part of a larger spiritual fabric that stretches across generations. The Celts believed that the spirits of the ancestors were always present, guiding and influencing the living. These ancestral memories were passed down through bloodlines, carrying forward the lessons, experiences, and wisdom of past generations. In this sense, the living are connected not only to the present moment, but to the vast spiritual heritage of their forebears. The ancestors, through their continued presence, shape the soul's path, offering guidance and insight as it moves through its many incarnations. This continuity also manifests in the way souls are rebonded with their families in future lives. The Celts believed that the soul often returned to the same bloodlines, not only because of fate, but because the ancestral lines carried with them certain spiritual contracts and purposes. When a soul is reborn within a family or community, it is drawn back to the unresolved issues, the unfinished business, or the unlearned lessons of past lives. The soul's memory ensures that it reconnects with the people it has known before, and that the patterns of relationship, whether harmonious or conflict-ridden, are carried into the next life. Through this continuity, the soul helps the family line evolve, heal, and grow, and, in turn, the family's collective energy helps the soul continue its journey toward enlightenment. The spiritual memory that the soul carries from life to life also allows it to recognize its purpose. In many Celtic myths, prophecies are central to the unfolding of events, and these prophecies often speak to the soul's destiny, a fate that stretches across multiple lifetimes. In stories like that of Cú Chulainn, where the hero receives visions of his past lives and future fate, we see how the soul's spiritual continuity manifests in a deeper understanding of its place in the greater cosmic order. The hero's journey, fraught with challenges and triumphs, is shaped not only by his actions in this life, but by the spiritual memory of his past experiences and his unfolding destiny. This belief in spiritual continuity also allowed for a more holistic understanding of time. For the Celts, time was not merely a linear sequence of events, but a circular flow, where the past, present, and future were all interwoven. The soul did not exist in a single moment, but was instead part of an endless cycle that spanned multiple lifetimes. The memory carried between these lives was not one of rigid structure or fixed fate, but a fluid understanding of the soul's journey, where each life added depth, nuance, yes, and understanding to the soul's greater purpose. The soul's path was not confined to a single lifetime, but was a continuous thread woven through the fabric of eternity. At the heart of this spiritual continuity is the idea of evolution. The soul, through its many lives, is constantly evolving, becoming more attuned to the divine and more capable of understanding the true nature of existence. The memory that the soul carries from each life serves as a foundation for its future growth. Each life offers the soul a new opportunity to confront its limitations, to expand its understanding, and to learn the lessons necessary to move closer to divine unity. Through this continual process of reincarnation, the soul refines its essence, moving ever closer to spiritual enlightenment, shedding its previous layers of ignorance, and becoming one with the greater flow of life. The Otherworld serves as both a place of reflection and rejuvenation for the soul, where it can review its past lives, gain wisdom, and prepare for its return to the mortal realm. However, this reflection is not about judgment, but about learning. The Celts believed that the souls, after each life, would find rest and nourishment in the Otherworld, where they could gain insight into their previous actions and make the spiritual adjustments necessary to continue their journey. The gods and ancestors, as spiritual guides, would help the soul process its past experiences, offering wisdom that would ensure the soul's evolution continued smoothly in the next life. In this way, the spiritual continuity between lives is a natural and ongoing process, one that does not merely revolve around past actions, but looks toward the potential of the future. The soul, guided by its spiritual memory and supported by the wisdom of the divine, is always evolving, always growing, always moving toward deeper understanding, greater enlightenment, and eventual union with the divine essence from which it came. Ultimately, the Celts viewed the soul's journey not as a solitary endeavour, but as part of an interconnected web of lives, ancestors, and spirits, a continual process of learning, growth, and spiritual development that spans across time and space. Through this spiritual continuity, the soul finds its place in the eternal dance of life, death, and rebirth, carrying the wisdom of the past into each new incarnation and forever evolving toward a greater connection with the divine. The eternal cycle of death and rebirth in Celtic mythology is a powerful and profound concept, one that governs not just the individual soul, but the very fabric of existence itself. In the Celtic worldview, life is not linear but cyclical, marked by a constant flow between birth, death, and transformation. This cycle, which spans not only the mortal realm but also the Otherworld, is seen as a natural, unending rhythm that shapes the universe, ensuring that life and death are always intertwined in an eternal dance of creation and destruction. At the heart of this cycle is the belief that death is not an end but a transition, a passage into another form of existence. Souls that depart from the physical realm are not lost but journey to the Otherworld, a realm of rest, reflection, and renewal. This world beyond death is not one of finality or punishment, but a place where the soul can reflect on its earthly journey, heal from its experiences, and prepare for the next phase of its existence. The Otherworld is a place of wisdom and transformation, where souls are given the opportunity to learn from their past lives and grow spiritually. Once a soul has rested and reflected in the Otherworld, it is reborn into the mortal realm. This rebirth is not a random occurrence, but a deliberate process, guided by the gods and ancestors, who ensure that the soul enters life at the right moment, with the right lessons to learn. The soul, now carrying the wisdom of its past lives, descends once more into physical existence, where it takes on a new body, a new identity, and a new set of challenges. Yet, despite the physical changes, the essence of the soul remains the same, carrying the spiritual memory of its previous experiences and the potential for growth. This cycle of death and rebirth is not one of isolation, but one of continuous learning and evolution. Each life the soul lives offers new opportunities to face challenges, to grow in wisdom, and to deepen its connection with the divine. The soul, through its many incarnations, becomes more attuned to the forces of nature, the rhythms of life, and the will of the gods. The process is not always easy, and the soul may encounter struggles and setbacks, but these trials are seen as essential to its growth. Each life brings the soul closer to its true purpose, preparing it for eventual spiritual enlightenment and union with the divine. The gods, particularly Manannán, Morrígan, and Dagda, play key roles in guiding the souls through this cycle. They are not judges but guides who help ensure that the soul moves through the transitions of death, rest, and rebirth with clarity and purpose. The gods also provide the wisdom and protection needed to help the soul evolve, ensuring that each life is a step toward greater understanding and spiritual development. Manannán, as the guide of souls, ensures that the journey from life to death and back again is smooth, helping the soul cross the boundaries between worlds. Morrígan, with her power over fate and transformation, ensures that the soul is ready for its next stage of evolution, embracing both death and rebirth as part of the greater cosmic order. Dagda, as the god of abundance and wisdom, provides the nourishment and guidance needed to maintain balance and harmony throughout the cycle. The Otherworld too plays an essential role in the eternal cycle. It is not just a resting place, but a space for reflection and rejuvenation. In the Otherworld, the soul is not punished for its past mistakes, but given the time and space it needs to heal and grow. The soul can connect with its ancestors, receive guidance from the gods, and prepare for the next incarnation, always evolving, always learning, always moving forward. The Otherworld, like the cycle itself, is a place of balance, a space where the forces of life and death coexist in harmony, ensuring that the cycle of existence remains unbroken. At the end of each cycle, death is not feared, but embraced as an inevitable and necessary part of existence. The Celts did not view death as something that disrupted the natural order, but as a passage into something greater, a return to the divine that eventually leads to rebirth. The idea of reincarnation was central to this belief, with the soul returning to the mortal world time and time again, each time with more wisdom, more understanding, and more spiritual insight. The eternal cycle of death and rebirth is, in many ways, the heartbeat of Celtic mythology. It is a cycle of transformation, of constant movement and growth, where the soul is always evolving, always progressing toward its ultimate goal of union with the divine. The cycle is not just one of individual souls, but one that reflects the natural cycles of the world, the changing seasons, the rise and fall of civilizations, the ebb and flow of life. Life and death are not opposites, but partners in the ongoing process of creation. They are inseparable, each one giving rise to the other in a continuous eternal rhythm. In the grand scheme of existence, the eternal cycle serves as a reminder that death is not to be feared, but embraced as a part of the larger process of life. The cycle of rebirth ensures that no soul is ever truly lost. It only moves through different forms, gaining wisdom and growth as it travels between worlds. The soul, ever evolving and ever learning, is part of a larger cosmic rhythm that governs not only individual lives, but the very fabric of existence itself. In this eternal cycle, the soul is not bound to a single life or a single death, but is always moving forward, always evolving, always returning to life anew. As we come to the end of this journey through the Celtic understanding of the soul, one truth remains clear and unwavering. The soul never truly disappears. From the first breath of life to the last exhale of death, the soul is an eternal, ever-moving force, never bound by the limits of time, space, or mortality. It flows through the cycles of life, death, and rebirth, carrying with it the wisdom and essence of all that it has experienced. In Celtic belief, death is not a finality, but a passage, a transition from one form of existence to another. The soul may leave the physical body, but it does not vanish into nothingness. Instead, it journeys to the Otherworld, a place where rest, reflection, and renewal await. And when the time is right, it returns to the mortal world, reborn with the wisdom of past lives, ready to continue its journey in a new form. The idea that the soul never truly disappears is rooted in the Celtic view that existence itself is cyclical. Life and death are not opposites, but two parts of an eternal dance. As the seasons change, as the land is reborn each spring and falls into rest each winter, so too does the soul undergo its own cycles, constantly evolving, constantly moving, and constantly growing. Each life the soul lives, each death it experiences, is but a chapter in its greater journey, never an end, but always a new beginning. The gods, the ancestors, and the forces of nature all play their roles in guiding the soul, ensuring that it is never truly lost, but always moving toward its next destination. Manannán mac Lir stands at the threshold, guiding souls from one realm to the next, ensuring that their journey is safe. Morrígan, with her deep understanding of transformation, helps the soul move through its own changes with grace and wisdom. And in the Otherworld, the soul finds peace and rest before it is ready to return again, refreshed and prepared for its next life. And yet, it is not just in the realms of the gods or the Otherworld that the soul lives on. The living world is intertwined with the spirit of the departed as the ancestors continue to watch over their descendants. The bonds between the living and the dead are never truly severed. The wisdom of the ancestors, carried by the spirits, flows through the generations, guiding the living with the lessons of the past. It is in the quiet moments, in the wind that whispers through the trees, in the dreams that stir the heart, that the presence of the ancestors can be felt. The soul's continuity is also felt in the memory of its actions. Though the body may decay and pass from the earth, the effects of the soul's journey ripple out into the world, touching lives, shaping destinies, and leaving behind an imprint that time cannot erase. The legacy of each soul lives on in the hearts of those who are touched by its presence, in the stories that are told, and in the lessons passed down from one generation to the next. The soul is never truly gone. It exists in the spirit of those who remain, in the land it inhabited, and in the eternal flow of time. So, as we reflect on the eternal journey of the soul, we come to understand that it is never lost, never absent. It moves through time like the tides of the sea, ebbing and flowing, always returning in new forms, yet always growing, always learning. The soul, though it may pass through death and rebirth, is eternal in its essence. It is a force of life and transformation, a part of the greater cosmic rhythm that binds all things together, and in this truth we find comfort, the knowledge that we too are part of this eternal cycle, forever connected to the souls that have gone before and those who will follow after. The soul, then, is not bound by the fleeting nature of life. It is eternal, infinite in its journey, and its memory, wisdom, and essence never truly disappear. It is always moving forward, always evolving, and always a part of the great dance of existence.